So when we want to really dive into health and understanding how health really operates in our body, then what we have to understand is that all disease starts with dis-ease. And that stress is really distress. Let me explain that. All disease starts as dis-ease. You don't get sick unless you're sick. Right? Does that make sense? So we just went through the pandemic, and it was devastating for people. But who was it devastating for? Those that were already sick. Right? That's who suffered the worst. And sometimes people go, oh, well, no, they always tell me these Sasquatch stories, Loch Ness Monster stories. I know this one person who was the picture of health. They did everything right. They ate great. They were fit, blah, blah, blah. They did all these things, and they still suffered. And I'm like, just because you don't know where their system was broke doesn't mean it wasn't broke. And I've been doing this. I've had, over 600,000 patient visits now at this point in my career. And I've talked to a lot of people. And I've talked to Olympic athletes, professional athletes, people that are at the peak of fitness and well-being if you looked at them from the outside. And they're wrecks on the inside. They're absolute wrecks on the inside. So I want you to understand that the way we teach it is we use a triune, right? There's the mental aspect of our existence, right? How we perceive the world, how we interface with it, how we react to it, okay? How we plan for it or lack thereof, right? There's a chemical aspect to our existence as well, right? We could be the staunchest materialists in science, right? We could say really everything just comes down to atoms. We could do that. But then that creates a problem right off the bat, is how do you explain things like love and compassion and right? There's problems with that. So we do workshops on that, and I want to teach more of those things. I think now, post-COVID, more important than ever is we need to get back to helping people learn how to, pull things apart, make a little more sense of them. Yeah, there was a period of time where we needed to be a little more combative and what have you about it. I think that time's over. I think now the time is helping people understand and make sense of it, that your brain creates your chemistry and your chemistry affects your brain. Right? And that's not just some kind of, ethereal concept. I mean, that is about as science as you can get. Okay? And that your physical form, in physics we say form equals function, function determines form. Right? It goes both ways, right? So a cube, a die, tumbles, and a sphere rolls. Right? Yeah. And so if I change that sphere and I make a little flat spot on it, every now and again it will tumble. It will hop. Because the form now you altered the form, now it alters the function. So what we know is that your physical fitness, the structure of your body, and the ability to have ease within that system determines your body chemistry. Yes? Twist your ankle, your chemistry changes, yes? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway, your chemistry changes, yes? Right? So we know that your form and function also parlays into your chemistry, and the reality is all of your organs of perception of what is mechanistically real in the universe comes through this part of the system. Your brain doesn't know it's a brain, right? It doesn't have any sensation at all. As a matter of fact, when you do brain surgery, we do it with people fully awake, right? We knock them out to cut their head off, the skull cap off, and then we wake them back up, right? So all of our perception comes through this. So in order for our chemistry to be balanced, then our perception system must work correctly. Yes? Otherwise, we have garbage in, garbage out. Anybody here married? Or with a significant other? Or have been in the past? You ever done this conversation? Well, what did you mean by that? What? I didn't say anything. Right? that look, whatever, and everybody's body chemistry changes. Look, my chemistry changed right just doing that, because I'm like, I'm a little PTSD about some of the things that my wife and I have gone over the years. But you see where I'm going with that, right? If that makes sense to you, then you can see that we cannot say that any one of these is more important than the other. That they are a triune, and they must be working perfectly. This communication has to work perfectly, because ultimately where science was going prior to COVID was ultimately it was going into this concept of what's called epigenetics. Has anybody heard that word before? Okay, it's you probably have, and you for sure will. Basically what it is when we first did the Human Genome Project, and we mapped the human genome. Now, by the way, that's not fully true. We mapped about 20% of it, and the rest of it is hypothetical, right? However, it's fairly accurate in the models. The hypothetical modeling has been shown to be pretty good, right? Pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. And the reason why I say not perfect, but pretty good is because they were saying that like 80% of your genetic coding is junk genes. Junk genes. It's just leftovers from some evolutionary process. You don't use it anymore. It's just kind of hanging out there. Until the theory of epigenetics came along, and the science seems to be supporting that more and more, which is, nope, that's not true. Better said, they're latent genes. And they're sitting there in the background, waiting to be expressed based upon environmental input. And that epigenetic expression will for sure be better if it gets triggered in us. There's a famine, there's pestilence, there's fear, whatever it is. It's too cold, it's too hot, right? Whatever that expression is, it will be for sure manifest in our children. And then it either, so that they're prepared, right? That makes sense, that God would design us like that. That makes sense. However, what that means is what you believe can literally change your genetic expression. And that's pretty wild. And to me, as both a scientist and a believer, is that explains some of the things we read in ancient scriptures. And because what you say, what you believe will determine how your life expresses. And that's why in our clinic, I hate labels. People who come in and go, I have ADD. I don't accept that label. I don't accept that. So you're like, okay, you have a trait. Okay, so what? You have blue eyes too. That doesn't mean anything. It means, they're pretty, nice. But other than that, your blue eyes aren't any better than my brown eyes, right? That's going to be a really important part of not only this workshop, but all workshops, and I'm going to tell you it's absolutely vital for you to get this if you want to understand what you're currently dealing with, even in our chiropractic clinic, for what you're paying us, hopefully, to accomplish with you. You have to understand this. The next thing I want to go into is this thing we call stress is really distress. Right? One of the best ways you can really screw with people's brains psychologically for long, maybe permanent periods of time is isolation. It's infinitely better to isolate people if you want to get them to spill their beans than it is to torture them. You torture them, they can steel themselves up against it, take on a sense of righteous martyrdom, and you may never get the truth out of them. That's why all this torture, that the CIA and stuff was doing, rarely presents the results that we want. But if you isolate people, they go crazy. You ever watch that show Alone? Where it's a competition. They take people who are usually very well educated in things like bushcraft and wilderness survival and what have you, just to get on the show. And then they say, pick 10 items, you can pick any 10 items, and then they drop them off in the middle of nowhere. And they have to very quickly assess the situation, their environment, and build a shelter, find ways to compete with other local predators, and get food and clean water. And then whoever survives the longest is who wins. Most of the people tap out for psychological reasons. Most of them. For those of us with a little bit of COVID weight, the good news is the people that are the thinnest drop out for medical reasons. So I'm not advocating as we go into these workshops that you have to be some like 4% body fat fitness competition person. Actually, there's tons of information that says that is not equal of health either. That level of obsession is actually dangerous for your health as well. Okay? So, understand that stress, mental stress, is really distress. Chemical stress, it's either a poison, it's inert, or it's beneficial. That's it. Everything you ingest, it's either a poison, it's inert, or it's beneficial. Even something beneficial in excess could be poisonous, right? And some things that we consider poisons have some beneficial use, right? Alcohol, absolutely poisonous. But small amounts actually have a positive health effect. Make sense? So please understand that we say distress. Try to work that into your vocabulary. I'm not having stress at work. I'm having distress at work. Because once you say distress, it also means what? There's something you can do about it. But you need stress to live, don't you? If you don't stress a muscle, it will atrophy. If you don't stress your mind, you'll go crazy. So you need some stress to thrive, okay?